Welcome back, everybody, to Embrace the Squiggle. Our guest today is a keynote and TEDx speaker, a board-certified wellness coach, and a journalist who has interviewed more than 2,000 leaders across healthcare, business, and innovation. But while he spent years asking others how they navigated pressure, uncertainty, and leadership, life eventually handed him his own high-stakes test. As a two-time cancer survivor, he experienced firsthand what happens when the identity, certainty, and control of the life you've built suddenly disappears. Now he explores, not exposes. Oh my goodness. I guess he exposes it too, but post-crisis leadership, decision-making under pressure, resilience, and the hidden cognitive and emotional strain that follow major disruptions. Today, you're going to hear how people rebuild confidence, redefine success, and learn how to lead themselves when the old version no longer fits. I am so happy today to welcome Savio P. Clemente. Welcome, Savio.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm excited. Let's see what
Welcome.
we unearth and dig up today.
Yes, I'm very excited.
Me too. So, Savio, we always start with this basic question of what did little Savio think he was going to be when he grew up? Like, what did the little kid version of you think the grown up version would look like?
So the little version of me always thought I was going to be an astronaut. Interestingly enough, I was fascinated with space. I wasn't really one of those individuals that were completely grounded. I used to make fun of where people were like, "Are you having fun?" Because it looks like you're not. I was just one of those introspective kids, and space just fascinated me. But then the Challenger explosion happened when I was really, really young, and I was like, "Oh, I don't think I want to risk my life on an accident." And so I shifted, and I had a natural inclination towards anything computer related. So I knew that I wanted to do something with computers, and I did follow that track all the way to college and post college.
I love that you went down the technology route. I also the technology route, but it sort of adopted me. I didn't necessarily go through it in college. When you were following that path through college, what were your expectations coming out of college? What did you want to do with it?
So I was fortunate. I was part of the dot-com boom back in the late 90s. And
Mm.
so they were paying us a boatload of money just to hire us. And so I worked for many dot-coms, and I actually liked the non-corporate atmosphere with that. And then I actually had a friend named Eric who I met through another friend, and he was working at the World Trade Center. And he actually said to me, he invited me to like a luncheon. And then afterwards, he's like, do you want to work here? I can get you a job in one of these. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, they'll pay you a really lot of money. And I'm like, does that require me wearing a suit? And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. I don't really, Eric, it doesn't feel right for me. I just I don't think I want to wear a suit. I just can't do it. And he's like, you're going to give up a job at the World Trade Center for a suit? And it turns out that he unfortunately was on the 104th floor. He passed away on 9/11. They found his severed arm with a tattoo of a bulldog. And so that's how they knew that he actually perished. And I just think back to myself. I tell you this story because I think it's really important to really trust your intuition. It might sound silly, and maybe I can't foresee that what's going to happen to me, but I do think it's important to really realize who you are and to embrace that. And I learned very young to do that. No one taught me that. It's just something that was just part of my individualism.
Savio, I knew we were connected at some point, right? When I saw your profile and we started talking about this podcast, because I also turned down a job in my 20s because of having to wear a suit every day. Um, I was in Boston at the time. But like hearing you tell that story, I was like, I remember telling my parents after the interview, like first interview, I'm like, this is great because I was working at a little nonprofit. Second interview, I'm like, they love me. They're offering me this big thing. And then I went in for my final interview and I borrowed an army green colored suit from a friend. And the woman who interviewed me said, "Well, that's an interesting choice." And I remember thinking like it was a full-fledged suit, but to her, the army green color was so like outside because everyone was navy suit people. And I was like, "Can't work here." I just can't do it. Right. And it's so nice to meet somebody else who has that same feeling and, of suits are just not what I want to be in every day.
I never told any of my family members that happened because they would have been like, "Are you kidding me? Like,
Oh, yeah.
wear the suit, okay? Wear the suit and just deal with it for 8 hours and then come home and wear sweatpants, whatever you want to do." But I never told anyone that. Now I'm telling you.
Well, I also love what you said about following your gut and your instincts because I am a firm believer in when you don't do that, the universe will put another similar occurrence in front of you because it's trying to teach you the lesson of following your gut and doing what's right. And when you don't face those challenges to learn that lesson, it just keeps falling right in front of you. So it's a really good reminder for sure.
There's an analogy that Oprah once mentioned on one of her shows years and years ago about life will send you a pebble, then a rock, and then a stone, and then a huge boulder. And when it sends you that huge boulder, you really need to course correct because if you don't, that's when the gap starts occurring, and it's so hard to get back to where you were or who you were.
Right. And if only we could all listen to learn to the pebble, right? If we could only trust that first gut instinct that we all have, that, feeling in your belly that something just isn't right. Um, and so, I mean, I feel like that's the perfect jump point because you had a major squiggle moment in your life, right? Where you got hit with a double whammy. And talk to us a little bit about that and how that kind of just made you change everything.
So, a little bit of background context. So, I worked in dot coms. I worked for many different internet companies, and then I decided that I wanted to make a pivot, a conscious pivot. So, I met a couple of friends. We started a production company. It. Let's just say it was hard. I don't think we were successful, and I know a lot of people when they talk about their life, they always say it was success. It was not successful, but it was a passion project, and I gave my energy, time, blood, sweat, and tears, and also financial resources too. And it just didn't work out, and so that sort of ended. And coincidentally, during that time is when, in 2014, I came back from a trip from Amsterdam, Paris, and London with a friend. And I just noticed that I was having night sweats. I'm like, I'm in Europe. Like, why am I having night sweats? Like drenching night sweats. Came back and I continued to have them. And then my stomach started getting distended, getting bigger and bigger. And then, so at that moment in time, I was only seeing a naturopath. I just didn't really have any medical issues or problems. And he's like, uh-oh. So naturopath basically analyzes your blood and tells you what diet structures, what vitamins to take. It's like, Savio, something is definitely wrong here. He's like, I can point it to three things, but I don't want to jump the gun. I need you to go get a sonogram from, mainstream medicine. I'm like, okay. So I got the sonogram. They wouldn't let me leave the office for like an hour and a half after I finished. And then they finally came out. They're like, you need to have a relative come pick you up and take you to the hospital. I'm like, what? I'm like, I drove here. And they're like, no, you need a relative to come pick you up. My dad took me to the nearest hospital. And literally an hour and a half later, I was admitted to the fifth floor. Later that night, I heard nurses whispering that I would be transferred to the seventh floor, which they call the cancer floor. So I knew that I had some form of cancer. I was only told about a day later that it was stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. I was bedridden for a week, and then because they had to put in a nephrostomy tube and to get all the liquid, about 8 liters of fluid that they removed from me. And then I was in the hospital for an additional 6 days. And 2 days before I left, the medical director came to me. She's like, listen, we know your health history. We know you're really healthy, but you need to start something called R-CHOP chemotherapy. If you don't, I don't know where you're going to be. And I'm like, whoa. And so that's how I found out that I had cancer. I can get more deeply into it, but it was definitely a squiggle, a huge squiggle. And it definitely made me rethink. I wasn't really afraid, Colleen and Ashleigh, that I was going to die per se. I was more afraid that I didn't fully live, that I didn't finish what I came here to do. Not that we all know what we came here to do, but I felt like I I was disappointing myself and others. And so that was really what I had to come up against in the sense of my identity.
I also feel like that's a really heavy burden to carry when you're about to approach chemotherapy or trying to heal yourself, feeling like you were letting people down, including yourself. That's a lot. How did you work on sort of processing those feelings while also, figuring out what you wanted to do to get healthy?
So I had about four roommates, and one of the roommates that I had was just a complainer. I'm not gonna, and he would say to himself, like he would yell and scream at the nurses and doctors. And when they left, I said, listen, I don't know you, but I'm like, what? Because he wanted to go home, and I'm like, what do you want to rush home for? I'm like, he's like, oh, my dog's there, and he had brain cancer. And he had radiation scheduled the next day, but he just was adamant about going home, and he was just really nasty. And I'm like, aren't you here to get healing? Like, aren't you here? Like, you're here like me trying to get healing. And I talked to a really good friend, really probably one of the wisest people that I've known at that moment in my life. And she's like, you don't get it. And I'm like, what? She goes, you have an idea of what your life may be after this hospital stay. He think he's going to die. So he wants to go and be comforted and be safe. And I'm like, oh. So even in that moment, I learned a great valuable lesson that of compassion and understanding. And the same friend also said to me when I told her about the chemo, she's like, are you sure you want to put those poisons in your body? And because she goes, like, it ravages the body. And I really thought deeply about it because it was still kind of my choice, even though I was in the hospital. Usually when you're told you have cancer, at least now, you have like a few days to reorientate yourself, talk to a couple of people, go to AI, you have all these choices. I didn't have any of that. And it was almost like a flash of inspiration that came to me. It referenced a movie, and I don't know if you both have seen it, called Little Buddha, starring Keanu Reeves back in the 90s. In it, Keanu Reeves plays Siddhartha, the Buddha before he becomes enlightened. He gives up all his worldly possessions. He's meditating with a few ascetics. I think they're living on like 1 grain of rice. And he overhears two individuals on a fishing boat. And one of them says, if you hold the string too loose, it won't play. And if you hold it too tight, it will snap. The path is the middle way. And I'm like, oh, I can say yes to the doctor, and then I can do a whole bunch of integrative modalities, which I did, because at that moment in my life, I'm like, I have to throw the kitchen sink at this. I have to figure out some way to heal myself from everything that's available to us in this life. And fortunately, I'm in a country where that's available to me. Other countries, and it's just not.
What a journey. And, to have that happen, it like just like that, right? Like, you show up one day thinking you're getting a simple test, and now it's like your whole life changed after that. And knowing your story, right? I know where you come out the other end. So, you know, y- y- to kind of take us through that journey a little bit of where you are now, some of that connection, and then how you are helping other people kind of get through this kind of crisis mentality.
So I did the treatment. It was 6 rounds. I had that first round in the hospital, then 5 additional rounds every 3 weeks. And it was about 5 days before Christmas. And they did scans, they did blood work, and they're like, you're cancer free. I'm like, wow. So it was like 4.5 months of treatment. And I asked the doctor, I'm like, if I ever came back, because scan anxiety is a real thing, recurrence is a real
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And he's like, lymphoma usually shows up in the same spot. So it would most likely be in your stomach. I'm like, okay. So for a decade, I was cancer free. I didn't do anything relating to cancer for 5 years because they kept telling me, everyone, that once you hit 5 years, it's less likely to come back. I just didn't want to build something from the experience and then have it all tumble down. So it was fine for a decade. And once again, I was coming back from a trip. This was an assignment. I'm a journalist, as you mentioned. And so I went to India for about 2 weeks. I explored 8 cities. I wrote about my experiences there. And then I stayed an extra 2 weeks. My parents leave the States during the winter, and so I visited them as well. So I was gone for about a month. I came back and I just noticed, even when I was there and maybe a couple weeks prior, that I was getting some ear fullness, intermittent sort of a little bit of hearing loss, a little bit, and then nasal congestion. And so I saw my oncologist and I did my yearly scans or yearly blood work. After 5 years, they told me, they were like, "We love you, Savio, but we don't really want to see you. If you don't have to come." I'm like, "Can I just do it for my own benefit?" They're like, "Yeah, you can totally do it." So I saw my oncologist. Blood work was fine. He's like, "I'll see you in a year, Mr. Clemente." I'm like, "Oh, by the way, doctor, this is what I'm experiencing." Because it was like intermittent. It didn't really happen a lot. And he's like, "Okay, that's fine." I'm like, "I'm going to go see an ENT in the city." He's like, "Okay, just have them send over the stuff." I'm like, "Okay, great." Went to go see my ENT and he's like, "Savio, there's a lot of there's a lot of inflammation in your right nostril." I'm like, he's like, "You're a B-cell lymphoma survivor." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like 10 years into it. He's like, "Do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity?" I'm like, "What?" I swear to you, I thought he was just going to give me nasal medication. And so he's like, and this is really key. He's like, "I've been burned as a doctor before." So he's like, "Let's be on the safe side. Let's do an MRI." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I did an MRI." He looked at it. It looked really weird to him. So I came in the following week and he's like, "Let's do a biopsy." And it turns out Friday at 3 p.m., I get a MyChart notification and tells me I have a relapse of lymphoma. And it was the day before my 25th college reunion. And I've emailed people weeks in advance who I haven't seen in 25 years or spoken to in 25 years. And I just didn't have the stamina, the desire, the energy to just fake it. Because I know myself. You can read it on my face. And when everyone's like, "Yeah, this happened to me and that happened to me," I'm like, so I just didn't show up to it.
I have so many feelings at the moment.
Yeah.
When you said that you found out about it on your MyChart notification, I I love that we can have electronic medical records. I love that we can follow them and look them up, but getting notifications like that on a Friday afternoon, I just I can't even imagine how that felt.
So I'm of the ilk that information is good because you can act on it quickly. So as soon as I got it, I called the office. He was off that day, my oncologist.
Of course.
This was another.
Of course.
This was
right?
another. This was another oncologist because the other one retired. So, but I did see him for a few years, and they were like, and so then I was nervous, obviously, so I called back an hour and a half later. I don't know what I was thinking. I did, and the staff attendant, she's like, "Savio, I'm going to email him for you." And he called me within an hour. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I told him. He's like, "Can you send me the scans?" And he's like, "Oh, I know this radiologist. He is excellent. He does not make mistakes." He's like, "See me in the office on Monday." And we did a bone marrow aspiration. If you've never had one done, it can be really, really painful. I'm just someone who just, grits their teeth and just gets through with it. He did that, and he spent an hour and 20 minutes explaining the comprehensive treatment protocol for a relapse or refractory lymphoma. It involved 2-3 day stays in the hospital, prepping myself by injecting myself for over a week to stimulate my stem cells, going into an office setting where they had this huge machine to do stem cell harvesting. So I got my own stem cells. Sometimes it's over a course of 2 to 3 days. Mine was only a day. Thankfully, they got about 5 million stem cells. Then going back to the hospital, usually it's about 3 weeks. I spent 29 days there. They give you back your stem cells. I lost about 26 pounds. One day I had tachycardia. So every time I would stand up, my pulse would go to like 170, 160. And so they had rushed me to ICU to get norepinephrine. I then left the hospital. They did scans. Fortunately, I got a CR, which is a complete response or complete remission. But he's like, "There is a clinical trial with an immunotherapy if you would like to do it." He's like, "It's an insurance policy." So my sister's like, "Why would you want to do that when you just went through months and months of treatment?" And I'm like, if it ever came back, then I can't use the same protocol. So I did that. And then I did about 5 months of physical therapy. And I'm here to tell the tale of, um, of that experience, and to also note, which I thought they were kind of being funny with me, because they were like, okay, so now you have another birth date. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, this is a medical thing. It's called medical rebirth. He's like, once your stem cells have been replanted and your bone marrow is completely gone, you are physically a different person internally. I'm like, what?
Hmm.
They're like, yeah, we count the days after your stem cells, so you have another birth date. So now I like to say I have my official birth date in the winter, and now I have another birth date in the summer. But that was the experience.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm learning this for the first time.
Same.
I don't think I don't think that it's talked about enough when people go through something like that and what you've experienced. Incredible.
And I just like to tell people that no matter what life throws at you, there's always a way to handle it or deal with it. And I used a couple tools at my disposal. So it helps that I'm a board certified health and wellness coach. And so I know the power of both realms, even though most of the time they're a little siloed. One attacks the other attacks the other. But I knew for myself that I had to have, once again, an integrative approach. So in the hospital, I didn't look at the chemo that they were giving me as something that's poisonous. I reframed it as an elixir, as they call it, mana from the universe, life force. And so I'm like, I need to submit to it and surrender to this, because it's medically and scientifically designed to do a job. And if I resist energetically, then it's not going to do its job. I also did something called psychological distancing. So I distanced myself from the problem. I created a buffer. So the Savio that was physically there, with the vitals being checked every 4 hours, and doctors coming in 13, 14 people deep doing rounds, and you're like, you feel not good, you look not good. I just made sure I met them where they were, because they weren't just healing me. I was healing myself with their help. And so it was a partnership. So I made sure that I created that separation, and I made sure that I was emotionally alive or mentally, physically there in order to have that correspondence. And I also really figured out for myself that I needed to have not only resilience, because you can probably say for a decade I was the poster child of resilience, but adaptive resilience. That I was in the SHIT, and I did have diarrhea issues, TMI, that I found a way to create flexibility or strategies within that situation. And then most of all, I think, and it's not talked often, is self-regulation. It's, everyone knows about what you can control, what you cannot control, but it's also about how do you come back to center. And so for me, Colleen and Ashleigh, I only had two things at my disposal that were free and available to me anywhere, anytime. And that was silence and stillness. And it's not talked about. And I was because in the hospital room, I was in a quarantine room because of the stem cell transplant. They just make sure that they stave off any idea of infections. And so I had that at my disposal, and there was like power in that ability to just be silent and still and allow recovery to happen, because not everything needs to be optimized. And I learned that through the process of recovery.
Oh my goodness, Savio, I have like 9,000 things that I could jump on after that. But one of the things you said that instantly I was like, oh, you said, people know what's in and not in their control. And I feel like people don't. I feel like so often, I know you talk a lot about high achievers, and I think sometimes those high achievers, I thank you, Taylor Swift, for coding it the, eldest daughter syndrome, because there's a piece of that people think things are in their control that really aren't. And I think a lot of the work and listening to you speak and, looking at the work that you do, it's such a gift for you to be able to help people see that.
Well, as you can imagine, so I work with healthcare leaders, and there is a reason why they say doctors don't make the greatest patients, because they're great at the data and the information and what's valuable and what's not, but actually living it and having that lived experience and going through that and being vulnerable, not knowing, having that uncertainty is really, really difficult. So I work with healthcare leaders primarily, but leaders in general, with this idea of uncertainty, that it's not about surviving the crisis, it's what happens after it. That's where you win or lose, because how do you recalibrate? How do you reintegrate? How do you actually find not only your new normal, but a new way forward? Because it's really, really difficult. And as you can imagine with the healthcare leaders, it's high stakes, not only for themselves and for their team and organization, but for another human being. So they don't want to make any mistakes. So it's this constant cognitive overload and cognitive pressure that they're constantly under. And really, my thesis is just the fact that no matter what the disruption, and we are going through a lot politically, socially, and also technologically with AI.
Just a little tiny bit these days.
Yeah, I liken the fact that I think we're being like super tested. It's like, people call it people are like China maxing and all these like wellness. I think we're like testing maxing. Like, I think we're like, the universe is like, okay, you're going to rise or fall. Like, what are you going to do? And now they're talking about aliens. I'm like, you really think that the human race is ready for aliens? I don't think so. We can't even regulate our own selves. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be able to sort of coexist with another species. I just don't see it happening soon. But anyway,
that's why I like to say we're all coming out of this with a superpower. I think we're all going to have some type of superpower at the end of all of this that we didn't have before. I shouldn't say the end of all of this. We don't know when it's going to end, but we're definitely evolving physically through all of this as well.
Yeah, at 100%. And it really goes back to what I speak on, which is the idea of pressure. How do you deal with the pressure that's being thrown on you, your own internal pressure? Because performance doesn't fail first, clarity does. So if you don't have the clarity first, then how are you supposed to figure it out? It's really difficult. And like you said, and I'm glad you pushed me on it, because I'm looking at it from my vantage point, the people that I've coached, the stages that I've spoken on, and people are like, yeah, I get it. But it's true how, like, that's like telling my 86-year-old dad, he's still alive, that he needs to find the resource within and cultivate that muscle. And no, he's not going to do any of that. He's not interested in doing any of it. He's actually content with just doom scrolling on Facebook, believe it or not, which is like a new thing for him. So I think really it first starts with the fact that you need to allow yourself to really figure out where do you want to actually go with your situation. So my mom complains about my dad because she's like, I'm like, just write a list for him. She's like, but he should know these things. I'm like, just write a list and have him check it off. Like, just make it simple for him. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll start to do that. Like, she's like, he should know this. And I'm like, no, he doesn't know it. Just because you've lived together for like 50 plus years doesn't mean he knows this information. Or maybe he's choosing not to remember it on purpose. I don't know. And so it's really important as well to really figure out the vision. Like, there's a lot of talk in the coaching world about vision. Vision is not a goal. Vision is how you want to be. How do you want to feel? What do you want to reclaim if something was lost? And people often are like, yeah, but you've dealt with something so difficult like cancer now twice. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is a dramatic story. I'm not going to like dismiss the fact that my story is pretty dramatic, but this could relate to anything: a breakup, being fired, a business loss, the world, whatever the case may be, and really figure out for yourself, how can I navigate forward? And what did I do in the past that could inform how I do that now?
Yes. So often when I'm talking with leaders or anybody and they can't see that path forward, I always go back to, when is the time you've been successful, right? What helped you be successful in the past? And even if it doesn't feel like it connects, talk to me about the time that you navigated an airport in a foreign country where you didn't speak the language. It's those same skills that can also help you navigate helping a team through change, right? It's getting folks to see what those natural superpowers that they have are and leaning more into them. I know I love Clifton Strengths, and I'm such a strengths enthusiast in that mindset. But where most people get stuck is they constantly go backwards and they constantly think about all the ways that they can't do it instead of the ways they can. And listening to you and just talking about your story, that positive attitude, right? I think of what a shock it must have been for someone like yourself who had not been really using conventional medicine in that same way to get this diagnosis where there's no other choice, right? You are not going to cure your cancer through a naturopathic way. As much as we would like to think it could happen, it was just not going to happen. And right, you had to make that decision to be open to something completely different and outside
Yeah.
of what was a high level of comfort for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to tell people that after I got the relapse, I explored literally every modality you can think of in the area of healing. I did not stop at all. The only thing I didn't do was psychedelics. And I'm a big advocate for that. It helps a lot of people. I've actually interviewed people in that space. But I knew for myself, just like anything in life, if you open a door, you have to be prepared as to what you are opening. And so I knew that my physical body was in trauma, but my mind wasn't. And I'm like, if I'm opening that door, then I have to be responsible for what it actually leads me to. And so that's the only thing I didn't. But I did like ecstatic dance where I danced by myself barefoot. Like I did like internal family system work where I literally, like I looked at ancient texts. Like I went a little overboard because, like I told my parents, I grew up in an Asian Indian household. And so as soon as I got my complete response to treatment, I don't call it remission anymore, as you can imagine why. They're like, okay, go back to work, like resume your life. I'm like, no, I can't go back to work because I don't feel like myself. I'm like, I can only get better now. I can't get better later. So I need to work out and figure out for myself what I need to do. So I literally put everything on hold. I focused like a laser beam on healing, and healing was what I lived and breathed every single day. And it wasn't the healing of take me away from this pain. It was the healing of what is the truth in the situation. And someone once asked me recently, what is like the greatest lesson you've ever learned? And I will echo it on this show with you, is the fact that when there's truth and you find an error in truth, you don't disregard the truth. You disregard the error in the truth. So I was naive when I was growing up, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that didn't make any sense. But no, you disregard the error in the truth. You can still allow that truth to flourish. It doesn't have to be the end of it all.
Wow. I mean, that's like the mic drop moment. I feel like we could talk for
Yes.
hours, but that feels like that mic drop moment. That is our wrap up moment for you. But this was such a great conversation, Savio. I feel like we could go on for hours. I'm going to toss it over to Ashleigh, though, because she does our fun rapid fire, wrap it up questions.
What an inspiration you are, and this entire conversation, I'm in awe of you. So I just have to say that before we get started, and just thank you for sharing your time with us. But as a part of all of these like these lessons that you've learned and all the research that you've done, what's one thing you're learning to let go of?
Expectation. Not that I don't
That's a
expect.
good one.
Yeah. I tell people that I'm really not attached to a lot anymore. But I have to be careful, and this is the danger. I'm also not detached, because I think that's the other side of the coin. So I do what I do, and I surrender to that, and then I don't really expect much from said effort, because everyone's trying to get somewhere, and I was on that ride as well. But now for me, it's coming from an inner drive rather than an outer drive.
Excellent. I've been working on trying to let go of expectation for close to 43 years now. So I'm a work in progress on that one.
I think we and the rest of humanity is trying to work through it. So there's strength in numbers.
What is an important morning ritual for you?
Meditation without fail. So that really helped me. And mine is very simple. I don't do lotus position chanting. I mean, that's wonderful for people who can do it. I just wake up, I listen to instrumental music, lie down. And if I don't get it, I actually can feel a difference in my being if I don't meditate. So it used to be 1 minute, then 5 minutes. Now it's 20 minutes and I need to have it. It's like my drug. So yeah.
When we start creating those routines for ourselves, boy, do we miss them when we don't have them, right? It's
Yeah.
incredible how impactful they are to us in just our mental health, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the people say to
Because you
me,
mentioned
oh, sorry. No, people
no,
often
go
say to me,
ahead.
they're
You
like,
were
I can't
saying people
meditate.
say to you,
Yeah, that like I can't meditate. I'm like, it doesn't have to be meditation. Journaling, walking in silence, prayer, breathing, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be something so formal. Like you don't have to do yoga if you don't like doing yoga. It's the same thing. So, yeah.
that goes back to expectation. I feel like we put high expectations on ourselves, right? So we think because it doesn't look perfect like it does in the movies or in books, we just throw it out altogether instead of finding what works for us personally. And who cares if it looks messy or silly because it's what is impactful to ourselves. So my last one, just because you shared that you were also dancing barefoot to help your health, what is your most listened to song on your playlist right now?
Gosh, that's a great question. I would say right now is this song by an artist called Blue Monroe, and it's entitled "Pain Taught Me." And she talked about pain taught me. It was just a whole bunch of verses, but it really spoke to me. So that's the one I'm listening to at the moment on repeat. And yeah,
So, at the end of rapid fire, we always ask our guests to share a book with our squigglers that either was impactful to them, or maybe it's mindless and it's just a great read, but something we can share with them. I also want to share that song, so we'll make sure that we put that with the episode as well. But what's a book you would recommend to everyone?
there's obviously many books I could reference, but I would say the one that had a profound change in me is A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And that quote, "Our deepest fear," is just beautiful. And I find it so resonant in everything that we do, because if you really boil it down to brass, tacks, at the end of the day, we all just want to be seen, want to be safe, want to be loved. And I think it first starts with us exuding that within ourselves in order to attract that to others.
Well, thank you so much, Savio. We have really enjoyed this conversation. And as Colleen shared a moment ago, I feel like we could go on and on. I have so many follow-up questions to just about every statement you said today. But this has been very inspirational, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. And at the end of the day, I would just like to leave your listeners with really the fact that through it all, I think we're all here to really figure out for ourselves, how can we be better? And the way it starts is really figuring out, what is it that I need to let go of? So it's a catch and release situation. And the more we let go of, the more our pot can be filled. If it's full, it can never be filled properly.
Love that. Savio, if our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Sure. You can go to my website, saviopclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE. They can see my keynote work. I have a few more spots for 2026. They can see my TEDx talk, so we need to talk about that, but 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And I know that inner stranger is something you guys would have honed into, but they can see that. And then every Wednesday, I have a Substack newsletter where I talk about head, heart, and gut intelligence. And also, currently, I'm running a interview series with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. And then if they want to find me on social media, I'm at every platform at The Human Resolve, because at the end of the day, what else do we have but this idea of resolution and resolve in our lives?
Thanks so much, and we'll make sure that Lily links all of those in our show notes.
Wonderful. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.